Thank you. Thank you. It's been a fantastic morning. My mind's been opened already, and really exciting, bubbling with positive stories. So I want to talk to you about what I think is a really important part of mental health, and in particular our collective mental health, which is our information diet. But before I do, first of all, I want to find out how you feel about the news. So if everybody would like to just think about the latest news they heard or read or viewed online or in a paper, and think about how it made you feel, and try and think of one word that sums up how the news makes you feel. And then Mark's going to pop round with the microphone if anybody wants to volunteer what comes to mind. Just put your hand up.
Hopeful.
Thank you.
Depressed.
Annoyed.
Good exercise.
Disappointed.
Anyone over this side? A couple down here.
Manipulated.
Sad.
Okay, that'll do. Got one more.
Fake.
Fake, okay. So, as we can see, there was one positive word, hopeful. Thank you for that.
Can I explain why? Because I don't watch television or read newspapers. All my news comes from positive networks of people within social media who are telling the real news.
Brilliant. Did everyone hear that? So he says that he feels hopeful because his news comes from social media and his own networks where he's getting a lot of positive information. I'm going to touch on that later. But the majority view there was a feeling that was rather negative. There was frustration and people feeling depressed, angry. And we know this well. And before I talk more about the impacts of that and why I'm working to change it, I want to first let you know about my own story and how I came to realise that this is such an important issue and also the potential for it to change. So in my early to mid-20s, I went through a really difficult period in my life. And I left where I was living, I left a long-term relationship, and I left the work I was doing. And I was feeling pretty lost and struggling with my sense of self and with what to do with my life. And I was depressed, and in particular I was feeling a lot of anxiety. And I started experiencing quite regular panic attacks. And I didn't know how to deal with these, and they were incredibly overwhelming and left me feeling quite incapacitated in getting through my life at that point. And if you'd have told me then that 6 years or so down the line, I'd be stood in front of a couple of hundred people talking about that, then I'd have thought that was absolute nonsense. But I've had an important journey since then to be able to get to this point where I'm perfectly comfortable doing so and don't feel at all that there's any likelihood that I'm going to panic in doing so. But at that point, that would have seemed like hell. And so at that time, as I started trying to understand the experience of anxiety that I was having and how to deal with it, there was many things that helped me transform myself through that situation, particular support of people close to me. But something really crucial that I learned, which you heard about in the video that was just played, was the power of the lens through which we view the world. And I started to realise how my own thinking was affecting my experience. Now, for me, that wasn't about positive thinking and trying to gloss over problems. I was very much, at that time, focused on really understanding my anxiety and where it was coming from and how to deal with it. So it wasn't about trying to ignore what was difficult or negative, but it was very much about changing how I dealt with it and changing my whole perspective on myself and my life. And it shifted me from a position of fear driving my experience to one where something else was driving it, where I could confront that fear and I could have a different view on the world. And at the same time as this was happening, I just moved to Shropshire in the Midlands, and one of my new neighbours heard that I had been working as a freelance editor. And they said, oh, do you know Positive News is published down the road? And I was like, that sounds interesting. I looked it up online, and I phoned up the editor at the time and said, I'm really interested in what you're doing, can I come and have a chat? And she said, yeah, and I went down to see them. And I looked at the paper, and I started looking through all these stories in it, and suddenly I had this incredible electric feeling run through my body as my whole sense of the world suddenly switched. And I thought, well, actually, there's a whole load of stuff going on which I didn't know about. There's incredible positive change taking place in the world. And I don't think the world is actually quite how I thought it was before. And what's really important about that for me was it actually started changing my own sense of what was possible for me. And then, without realizing what was going to happen, I was very quickly thrown in at the deep end, because I started volunteering for the organisation, and then I was quickly given a job. And within a couple of years, the founder who started the organisation in her later years passed away, and the company landed on my shoulders. And before I knew it, I was running the company, and I moved it to London and have been scaling it up since and trying to reach a bigger and bigger audience. And incredible things have happened in a short space of time. But what's made that possible for me was a fundamental shift in perspective about what I could do and what was possible for us as a society. So what's important about that experience in relation to the media is that it taught me the power of the lens through which we view the world and the power of how we use our attention. And I thought, if I can shift myself from being driven by fear to empowering myself to believe that I could do something purposeful and meaningful, and recognizing that having that purpose really shifted my experience as well, then what does that mean for us collectively? So I thought, what we're doing is collectively we're telling ourselves a really, really rubbish, disempowering story about who we are, about the world we live in, and about what's possible. And the more and more I looked into this, the more I realized that the information that the media is giving us is valuable. So we need to hold power to account. We need to expose exploitation and inequality. We need to expose corruption. We need to know about the dangers to us. Fear is a useful emotion, as I came to learn in my own life, but it's way out of proportion. And I think what the media is doing, a lot of the time, there's this kind of background stress trigger that's all around us. And I think that's having harmful effects on our mental health, individually and collectively. And there's research now over a number of decades that shows this, that negative news can lead to anxiety, depression, passivity, can disengage us from society, can reduce our trust levels in other people. It can create what's called learned helplessness, where we feel that our behaviour can't make a difference, that it doesn't matter. So we can end up feeling cynical. And although where good journalism is playing that really important function of letting us know about dangers, letting us know about MPs that are, the expenses scandal, things like this, which are really important for us to know as a society. At the same time, it's actually, I feel, limiting our potential. And there's a different way that we can do things. So I found out, through my own experience of dealing with the fight or flight response, when I used to experience panic attacks, that feeling of being out of control, the stress chemicals running through my body, and how it made me feel just a general sense of terror, that reaction in our bodies is a very powerful thing, and there's something at the other end of the scale which we can trigger, which the positive emotions researcher Barbara Fredrickson calls the calm and connect response. And this releases a whole different set of chemicals in our body when we trigger positive emotions. It actually opens our awareness, and positive emotions are what enhance creativity. They create innovation, and they connect us, they increase our trust levels, whereas negative news can actually lead us to over-exaggerate in our minds threats to ourselves, particularly threats of violence. Positive emotions do the opposite. And this is really important when you think about the fact that actually, statistically, the world is more peaceful than ever. And things like the fact that crime in the UK, as in other countries, is falling, especially violent crime. that generally we're getting healthier, that many countries are getting more democratic. And this isn't to deny the problems of the world which we need to know about. But when we're relentlessly focused on the problems, then actually we can't do anything about them. So I realised for myself and for us as a society that we need to give our attention to what we want to nurture. We need to nurture our potential because we're in a situation now where we face massive global crises like climate change and social inequality. But at the same time, there's incredible things happening. In particular, our connectivity gives us this huge opportunity to collectively address these problems we face. And in doing so, we have the opportunity to bring out the best of all of us, to bring out all our unique gifts, the way that we can each contribute to answering those problems and creating a world where we really can thrive. Because we have the resources, and I believe that we really have the human potential. So, in my work at Positive News, so I'm the editor-in-chief of Positive News, and our publication is all about reporting on progress and possibility. And this isn't just, as I say, stories that feel good. This is about real useful information, socially relevant stories. So if we're tackling an issue like homelessness, for example, we can still report all the statistics about the problem, and we can look at where it's getting worse, but we can come at that through an angle of what's been done about it, such as an article we ran recently about homeless walking tours in London, where homeless people are giving tourists tours of the city, giving them an alternative view of the city. And this is giving homeless people a way to start getting experience, connect with others. It's giving them a pathway forward. And there's so many stories of transformation out there that show what's possible. Another one that comes to mind would be a story about a former gang leader in Birmingham who managed to turn his life around. And he set up a social enterprise to help educate other young men in the area about why the gangster lifestyle and crime isn't the way forward. And after that period, he managed to negotiate a truce between two rival gangs that were causing a lot of problems in the area. And it saw a huge, huge drop in the crime rate in that area. So it's with compelling stories like these that we can find a different way into the problems that we face, and at the same time give more attention to the route that we want to take as a society. And I think what's really important to this is it comes back to the purpose of journalism. So some media will still tell you that what the news does is it reflects reality back to us. It's there to mirror society. But for a start, that's not true, because what we see in the news is a tiny fragment of what's going on in the world, and it's generally humanity at its worst. And as I say, this isn't to play down the important role of journalism in reporting problems, but it's far too excessive. So there's so much of the world that we don't hear about, as I think is quite obvious to a lot of people when you look at your everyday lives and compare that to the story that you hear in the media. But this story is really powerful. The stories that we share give meaning to our lives. They affect our sense of selves and each other and the world we live in. So for me, the media needs to take responsibility for the fact that it is a storytelling machine. It creates our social consciousness, and we need to think about the mental health of that collective mind that we're part of as a society. So now there's new research that's coming out that's starting to show the impact of when we report with a positive lens or a constructive lens. And this research is showing that when you address the same core facts in a story, but come at it from a positive angle, it has the complete opposite effect to the negative impacts that I talked about earlier. It can really engage us with the story in a way where we can actually remember more information, where we actually feel more trust, and where we feel that something can be done about a problem. We feel more motivated. Research last year from the University of Southampton showed that positive angles make us feel more likely to donate to charity, more likely to voice our opinion, more likely to take pro-social actions. So these different stories can engage us better with each other and in the societies in which we live. And so for me, the journalism has to ask the question of what's it really here to do? Because it's no longer here just to give us information. As we know, we have so much information all around us coming through screens all around us and on our devices, it's hard to get away from. And it's actually quite hard to notice the ongoing impact of that. And I feel it's like this background noise. It's like a voice in our heads, with anyone who practices mindfulness and tries to become aware of the voice in our heads and not be driven by our thinking all the time. I think collectively we have to be mindful about our media and the information that we're consuming, because it's like a background stressor that's there affecting how we feel. So if we ask what really is the purpose of the media now, surely it's to give us information which is useful, which we can actually do something with, that can empower us. So that's not about advocating particular things, but for us at Positive News, it's about reporting in a way which allows us to be more engaged in society, to find where problems have been solved, to nurture those solutions, give more attention to them. And I think here in Guernsey, you have a beautiful opportunity to do something like that, because being an island, you very much have a clear community. And the Dandelion project has already created a fantastic story. And it's a story which a whole community can connect to define its sense of self. So it's a story of possibility, of positive change. And so I wonder to myself, and when I look through the stories that we publish and I see all this positive change taking place, and it makes me feel more alive, it awakens a sense of my own potential and a sense of the potential of the whole of our societies and of humanity. And I think if we all felt like that, if we could all trigger that sense of possibility and connection through stories that are more empowering, what could we do? And I think it's that thing, if we can connect to that, if we can stimulate that and bring it out, it's actually that is the answer to solving all these crises that we face. So what's really important for the future of journalism for me is journalism with purpose, that takes responsibility for its impact and chooses to frame things in a constructive way, where it's offering us as audiences information that we can really use. But the other thing is also, that's really important to the future journalism, is community. Because digital technology is now really disrupting journalism, and that's creating a massive opportunity for the kind of journalism we're doing. Because what we're finding is that, lo and behold, what the audiences have known all along is that we want positive stories. The problem for the industry is, to date, it hasn't known how to do positive journalism well. It's thought it's just about stories that make us smile. Actually, with our training arm, the Constructive Journalism Project, we teach how you can do rigorous quality journalism, but with different angles, with different interview techniques, such as asking questions that, instead of fostering people to victimization, instead foster how they've transformed through difficult experiences. Where are the instances of post-traumatic growth, not just post-traumatic stress? So there's these techniques we're developing and applying to journalism that media organizations around the world are now taking up, that we're training them in. There's a massive shift happening. And that's being allowed to happen because the media is seeing that now people share positive content more than they share negative stuff online. And social media is increasingly driving traffic to news organizations' websites. We're becoming each other's news curators. As you pointed out earlier, you're going to positive sources you trust for information that's relevant and useful to you. So this gives us a massive opportunity to create new stories, to understand our world, and to give purpose to ourselves and our communities. And we've really taken this idea to heart at Positive News, where this summer we did a 30-day crowdfunding campaign where we actually turned Positive News into a cooperative. So we're now owned by our readers and journalists. And we used crowdfunding so that people all around the world could invest in Positive News and help us to grow. In 30 days, we raised £263,000 and now have 1,500 co-owners in 33 countries around the world from age 18 to 89 who own our organisation and want to support our journalism. And this shows that for the future, media is going to be built around communities of shared values and purpose. And it's about no longer a one-way conversation of the media dictating a story of what's important, but it's working with that community to find out what information is important and useful and presenting it to them in a way that actually can engage us with each other and with the kind of world that we want to create. So what I'd leave with you is to remember to think about your information diet, where you're getting the information that's affecting your sense of yourself and the world, and how can you tailor that to create an information diet that gives you all the information about the problems that you need to know about, but actually gives you a way of looking at the world that can bring out the best of you and the best of the people you connect with. Thank you very much for listening.